What's up guys, and welcome to a new C# tutorial. Today we're gonna cover functions. A function is basically a piece of code which you can repeat anywhere, but by only typing the name of that piece of code. You don't need to copy paste the whole code. So let's do, for example, create a function here, and let's do static void. We're creating it static because we want to call it in the static here, and you can't do that when this is not static. So let's just do a static void, and you do that like this. What am I missing? Oh, I forgot to name it, of course. And let's say send message. And in here we're gonna do a piece of code. So let's say console.writeLine. Let's do hello, and let's copy this, and let's say this is a function, and let's do a smiley, and let's do an empty right line. So now we got this code, and to basically perform this code in the main, in the startup function, we just need to type the name, send message, and then like this. And we can do this over and over again. We can do this even 3 times, and then we perform this code even 3 times in a row without having to copy paste this like this into the main. So let's run this real quick and take a look at it. Hello, this is a function, smiley face, and it's performed it 3 times. So let's get a little bit deeper into the function and add a parameter. A parameter is an argument you can give over here when calling the function. It's a variable which can be used over here. So let's say string message. We're creating a string variable in here, and it has to be called over here. So let's do, for example, in the console.writeLine, we're gonna send the message. So I'm gonna remove the second 2, and let's add a message here. This is a parameter. So when we run the code, it's gonna do console.writeLine message. Message is over here an empty variable, but we gave that variable a value over here. So let's add one more, and we're gonna say this is a second parameter. So let's run the code now, and as you can see, it's gonna write this is a parameter, this is a second parameter. So how can we give this a default value? You can do this by doing equal, and then saying, for example, this is the default message. So when we do this and run the code, it's still gonna do the parameter, but if we add a send message and add no arguments to it, we can run the code. This is a default message. You can also do it by creating a new static void and calling it the same and giving it empty parameters, and then we can just copy the code in here and say this is the default message. This won't do anything wrong as long as you don't give it the same parameter. Look, it's gonna show this error. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start and use the empty function twice. So let's run it and see what happens. And as you can see, it's gonna do the default message. So to test this for real, I'm gonna remove this parameter just to show you that the second one works. You can see it's still working. So you can basically add any variable in here. You can also do, for example, a list of strings. Let's call it list in this case. You can add an integer, but you also need to add them here. So in this case, we're just gonna do string message, and I'm gonna remove this one. So over here, let's do a return function down here. So we're gonna do a static, and a return function is a bit different. It's gonna return a data type. So what do we want to return in this case? I guess we're gonna do an integer. So we're gonna do a static int, and let's say multiply. And we're gonna ask for 2 parameters, and those are gonna be int num1, or let's say just number 1. Yeah, number 1, and int number 1, and int number 2. What this is gonna say is program.multiply int. Not all code paths return a value, which means not every path returns a value. So what we need to do now is return something, and in this case we're gonna return number 1 times number 2. So yeah, that's basically how this works. So if we do this here, there are 2 ways we can do this. We can do console.writeLine. Let's say multiply, and in here we can say 9 to do 2 times 9. We can also create an integer, int multiply, let's call it like that, equals multiply, let's say 3, 5. And then we can do console.writeLine the variable. Because this returns an integer, it makes this possible to call or to assign it to an integer variable and to print it out too. So let's run the code. And as you can see, 18, 15. There's also a way to do this with booleans. For example, let's say we're going to create a variable. We need to make it over here, static bool, and let's say is logged in, and let's say set it to false. And you can, for example, do this in a class later, make it private, and have static bool is logged in. Or let's change this for, just to make it more clear, logged in. So let's say is logged in, and we can return logged in over here. So now we do a return value in an if statement. Usually the return has to be at the bottom of the code. So over here we're gonna do a static int calculate. Let's call it calculate. And over here let's do a char. Let's say operator, and let's say int number 1, int number 2. Okay, so in here, oops, let's check if operator is equal to, and let's say plus. Then we're gonna do return number 1 plus number 2. We can return this here. So as you can see, it's gonna give an error now because not all code paths return a value. Because if this is not true, it's not gonna return anything, and that's gonna crash everything. So let's say else if operator is equal to minus. Let's change that to a char, minus. Then we're gonna return number 1 plus number 2. 2, and I need to make the minus. So it's still not having everything. So let's copy paste this and do this for multiply. Over here multiply, and let's say we could actually make this over. No, well, never mind. I'll change it like this. Okay, so let's say divide. Still not having everything, so let's make it else. Else it's gonna do the default, and then it's gonna return. Let's say we return a value of -1, and yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's remove this real quick, and we can do console.writeLine, and then we're gonna do calculate, and let's say the multiplier of multiply, and let's say 4 times 7, and as you can see, it's not giving an error here anymore because we have a return value for every path. So there's no way that there's no return value over here because we have an else. So if we use this, we can run the code, calculate, and as you can see, it returns 28, and we can also change this to plus. So functions are really useful like this because they can make stuff a lot easier. Also, if you make an API for different people to use, then the functions could be really useful because people want to use your functions you made to make stuff easier to program. So that's what you use functions for. And I guess that's basically all there is to functions. Yeah, that seems true. Yeah, that's all there is to functions. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.